Certainly the main thing that's going on is change.
Mm-hmm. So what is Southern literature? What sets it apart from different kinds of literature?
Well, Southern literature, of course, is also changing. You know, the traditional concerns of a poor, rural economy, rooted to a particular history, rooted to a particular sense of identity that was often, to a great degree, shaped by the Civil War. Those aspects still exist to a greater extent than a lot of people are willing to recognize. But I think the truth of it is that the problem with Southern literature comes when people say, well, it has to be one thing. And if we can't define what that one thing is, then it doesn't exist. But in fact, the South, as much as there are those themes of history and identity in the land and so forth, and place being very important, the South has always been many different things. Mm-hmm. There are 5 Souths, there are 12 Souths that share certain things in common, but that have always been diverse. And I think what we need to do is and really where you understand what Southern literature is not when you look at the diversity of works created in the South by Southerners, but when you compare them to works created in the West by Westerners, or works created. Once you see those differences, then you begin to realize what Southern literature is.
So what young Southern writers, let's say under the age of 45, are really doing things that are innovative and interesting to you?
I like under 45, although I just turned 45, so that's the new young. It used to be 30 was the old, but well, there's a wonderful Raleigh writer, June Spence, whom I greatly admire. A woman who's very famous, who I think still is under 45, is Haven Kimmel, who's doing very interesting stuff. George Singleton, down in South Carolina, former student of Fred Chappell's, is terrific. I mean, there's endless numbers of people that are there's so much richness out there, you almost don't want to name specific people at the exclusion of others, but I really, June's work has impressed me immensely, I must say.
How much a part of their writing and Southern literature, say of the past 5 or 10 years, is race? Is it still as integral to Southern literature as, say, in the work of Flannery O'Connor 30 or 40 years ago?
I would say that race remains an abiding concern. The racial dynamics have changed greatly in the South, and so I don't think that it's quite as explicit, but neither is it as explicit in society in general as we tackle various issues. I mean, one thing is we also, though, have many more African American writers than we did. So, and Hispanic writers are rising up. So race is being covered not just as the problem of white society and what to do in confronting race, but race is becoming a sense of identity it's a positive thing, a sense of identity that's being explored as a cultural issue, not only by people looking into different cultures, but by people from those cultures who are now getting an opportunity to have their voices heard. So I think we're limited in just seeing race as that old problem and looking at it more now as a reflection of the greater diversity that we have here.
Sure, it's glass is half full instead of half empty, I suppose, the old cliche. Well, let's talk a little bit about your first book, Remarkable Reads. How was the process of writing that book similar or different to writing the top 10?
I'd say they both came from the same impetus, and that was I wanted to get writers down at our level, and that is down as readers. We often go and hear writers write about the craft of writing and how they go about it. We very rarely hear about that experience that they have in common with us, and that is as readers, as people who admire the work of other people. So in Remarkable Reads, what I did was I asked 33 writers, I contributed an essay too, to pick a book, pick an adjective that described that book, use the adjective to explore the meaning of the book, and vice versa. So we had Charles Frazier of Cold Mountain fame wrote about the most tempting book he read. Peter Cameron wrote about the queerest book he read. That was an interesting essay, and he went to the dictionary and he took all the different definitions of queer and applied them to a specific novel. Doris Betts wrote about the most unpleasant book she read, which was...
So they chose the adjective.
I never tell people what to do.
And then found the books that related to that adjective, it sounds like.
Exactly.
That's a great idea.
And again, you assign a book for someone to review, and they tell you whether they want to review it or not. So they have some choice. But in something like this, the best work is produced when it comes from them, and it's something that they need to say. So I gave them the basic outline, but I said, you pick the adjective, you pick the book. The only time is if somebody wanted to use the same adjective, and then we just find a synonym for it.
Well, now, having come through this twice, what advice would you give to somebody who is interested in editing a collection like this?
I think the main thing is that you want to be original, but not too original. So if you've got an idea for a book, do your homework and find out if someone else has done a book like that, a literary anthology of North Carolina. See if there are others out there, figure out what they are, and how yours will be distinguished from them. Publishers don't necessarily want to take a flyer on something that no one's ever done before. They like the idea that it's somewhat familiar. Also, the big thing now that's changed is that when you're doing your proposal, they really want a marketing plan, believe it or not. Not that it won't change, and not that they won't take it over, but they not only want to know about your artistic ideas for the book, they want you to really spell out who the market for it is and how it's going to sell. So a lot of that has got to be, unfortunately, figuring out, as much as I was saying before, really it's got to come from your heart, and you've got to do an authentic piece of work. If you want to sell it to a publisher, you've also got to be able to make that case to them.
Well, like you said, it's a balancing act. You really have to realize that book publishing is a business. There's a bottom line. They have to pay their editors, and they have to pay, their copy editors and everybody involved in the production of a book. But at the same time, that can't, I think, override everything about the process of actually writing a book. Well, let's talk a little bit about, I know I get tons of questions and folks watching this about nonfiction books. So do you need a literary agent? Did you have an agent when you sold the first book to Norton?
I did. And he was a former roommate of mine. So I just happened to know somebody. I think the best way, especially with a nonfiction book, is there are two things I would do, and people call me and ask me about this. The first thing is I would go to the bookstore or library, and I would find similar books. I would turn to the acknowledgments. I would say who they thank, specifically who is the agent that they thank, and then try to find that agent, and Google makes that very easy these days, and track that person down. We also, in North Carolina, we have a very rich resource in the North Carolina Writers Network. They can't get your book published for you, but they can help you find people who can help you find the people who can help you get your book published. It is very tempting to self-publish. It is very hard to do it alone. And if you have an agent, the chances that your manuscript will be read increase vastly. Now, a surprising thing is that even books that agents accept don't always sell. I know my agent told me that 50%, he turns down tons of manuscripts, and about half of those that he accepts don't get published. It's very difficult.
Very interesting. Well, I'd like to thank Peder Zane for joining us here in studio today for The Artist's Craft, and the book that he has currently available is The Top 10. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. I enjoyed it.
And thank you all for tuning in. For all of us here at RTN Channel 10, I'd like to thank you for tuning in today. Thank you very much. Thanks so much.
That was great.
That was a great
Man, that thing